Conversations across time. Conversations across time. Conversations across time. Conversations across time.
Good evening and welcome to Conversations Across Time. You will note that we are in the Express Studio, which is a smaller location. This is where we give our tutorials from. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panel, and the interesting thing is that they're all here as themselves, and you will recognize them as playing many characters. First, I'm going to introduce to you Mark Hoffman, who has played many characters, as I said before, and who is the history consultant. He's the history advisor for Conversations Across Time.
Good to be here. Good to be here.
And to my left, Mr. Irv Madnick. And the interesting thing about Mr. Madnick is, as all his experience as a trial attorney comes across when you hear him play the various characters that he's played. Irv, ever the attorney, that's what you are on camera. So thank you, Irv Madnick. Thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
So we are, of course, post-election, and we actually did a show on the Supreme Court. So this is a tutorial to sort of give you some illumination around the facts that we sort of glossed over a little bit in those shows. So I want to start with what I think is controversial, and that is that I'd like to say to the panel that it is ironic that Donald Trump actually became president of the United States as a result of the Electoral College vote. And also, many will say without question that he was supported by a lot of people who we would deem as certainly having racist tendencies. And the irony is that the Electoral College was something that was devised by our founding fathers as a way to offset the power that the southern states had because of the number of slaves that they had. So you want to talk about that a little bit, Mark?
Yeah, and as you said, it's total irony that this president-elect, Mr. Trump, was elected in a racial atmosphere when the Electoral College, and by the Electoral College, when the Electoral College was founded primarily because of the problem with slavery in the South. The slaves had no suffrage and they had no rights. The population in the North was about double the South. So if we had direct popular election of the president, all the presidents in the foreseeable time from 1789 would have been Northerners. So they devised a system that count the slaves as 3/5 of a person for the purposes of representation, and that's how the Electoral College is decided. You get electoral votes based on the number of members of the House of Representatives plus your 2 senators. So by doing that, it increased the population of the South. The South, Virginia then had more electors than New York, even though New York had a greater population than Virginia. And the first 4 out of 5 presidents that were elected were from Virginia, and they were Southerners. So we've come pretty much full cycle, and the problem is changing it because it's certainly not democratic. And as Irv said, and as Vivienne said when we were discussing this beforehand, it's almost impossible to change it.
The possibility of changing the Electoral College.
I think it's impossible because if a president's going to win, as Trump did, by winning the electoral votes, he's certainly not going to look to change it. I mean, he lost the popular vote by 3 million and still became president. So the chance of him leading a fight to change the Electoral College is, it's ridiculous to even think about it. I think what you have to do, and I thought the Democrats had done it this time, was to realize where they had to win, what electoral votes they needed. They just didn't do a good enough job in securing those votes and what they considered to be their firewall. Again, I'd love it if it was a popular vote and whoever won the popular vote would win, but that's not the way it works. So you have to work within the system, and if you're going to win, you have to win within the system. And hopefully, the Democratic Party learned something from this election. I don't know what it is necessarily, but it certainly has to be studied and see what they can do. So when it comes around next time, if they want to get their point across.
If we're truly democratic, we should abolish it. Just as a historical footnote, the 4 presidents that were elected by the Electoral College and did not have the popular vote, lost the popular vote, all turned out to be pretty bad presidents. So that doesn't bode well for Mr. Trump.
Well, okay. I mean, I don't know that it's there's a definite correlation to that, but you would think so based on his background and what appears to be his intellect. We don't know exactly what it is, but what appears to be his intellect, that he may not be the greatest president.
Well,
and of course, a lot of that's going to depend on who's around him and how they react and how they advise him. And because, as you know, the president has only limited powers. I mean, he can't. He's not the king, and he's not the.
Well,
Now he only has limited powers.
And see, Mark is
he does
saying
under the
now-
Constitution, and I know you, Mark.
Mark is saying now because he's thinking that we're heading down a precipitous
I
pathway
know.
here.
I have a little more faith in the system, I think, than Mark does, but that's okay. I recognize Mark's position.
Well,
of course, being a historian, you always look to history, and they say history repeats itself. So he has adequate information that he can base his theory on. But I also have a lot of information to base my theory on.
I respect your opinion, and we need an optimist and a pessimist on the panel, because otherwise it would be people getting ready to jump off the Walt Whitman. But
exactly.
But just some of the things that I'll call Mr. Trump. I don't want to call him president-elect. But one of the things Mr. Trump is doing now is he's already moving in a direction of authoritarianism.
Oh.
He's going to have his own
Private
security force. Which
Now, when
No,
you
I don't
say
think.
that,
Whoa! I don't think that's a given. I mean, that he's going to have his own
well,
private security force.
let's just say that that's what's being
proposed.
floated.
That's what he wants, and that's been proposed.
And the interesting thing when you say headed towards an authoritarian government, because that's one of the elements.
Right.
Private security.
Private army?
Private security force that would supersede. He's already attacking the CIA.
Yes.
He's already attacking the CIA
intelligence
because he
community.
didn't like their intelligence on the hacking and Putin influence on the elections. He didn't like it, so he says the CIA is not viable. Look, they made a mistake in 2000 with the weapons of mass destruction. So he's already trying to phase the CIA out. He's going to have his own private security forces, which is exactly what Mussolini did and what Hitler did. They circumvented the normal police, they circumvented the army, and they had their own private army.
And they attacked the press.
Attacked the press, which he wants to have a stronger libel law so he can sue the New York Times. He wants to take Saturday Night Live off the air because he doesn't like Alex Baldwin.
And you're laughing because
I'm laughing at all these things because he just can't do that. He has a Congress that he has to persuade. He has the courts that he has to persuade, and you're suggesting that they'll just roll over and do whatever he wants to do.
Well, so far they haven't they?
No, I don't think they have.
The Republicans haven't?
No.
Well, I think
they haven't done anything yet. What have they done?
Wait, the Republican. Well, we can go by what
He's not
Trump
president
did
yet.
and what he said during the primaries and during the pre-election time, and how the Republicans who opposed him now have come around to kiss his ring or kiss some other part of his anatomy. And Mitt Romney, who had the most harsh things to say about him,
that's what I was getting ready to
ran
ask.
into Trump Tower kissing his butt, wanting to be Secretary of State, and Trump played along, strung him along, made him look like he was considering only to embarrass him, and Romney took it like a punk.
Yeah, well, maybe the Republicans in Congress look at it, not that they're going to beatify Trump, but maybe they look at it as an opportunity to get their program through. And their program, by the way, is not what Trump proposed during the election. He had his own crazy things. I mean, free trade was not what he was proposing. He was looking to put tariffs on all these countries.
Well, and he's
That's
moving
not
to do
what
that.
the basic Republican Party wants to do. So if they're all of those Republicans are going to lay down and say, okay, Mr. Trump, we want you to be the authoritarian ruler here. We want you to be a dictator. We don't want you to be president. We want you to be a dictator. And all the courts say, hey, it's okay.
No.
Let him be a dictator because maybe 8 years from now we'll have our own army to take over.
They're not going
I don't
to
believe
let him
that'll
be
happen.
a dictator.
Okay.
He will decide, and the people around him will decide how much authoritarian they want, and they will make Congress kowtow to him. Mr. Krugman in the New York Times wrote an interesting article about what happened in Rome, even though they threw out most of the Roman power when they were the power in the world. they were a republic. But he shows how the dictatorship came and how the Senate just became a rubber stamp, and how Caesar and Caligula became dictators. I'm not going to put Trump in the same sentence as
That was
Caesar.
before my time, by the way.
I know, a little bit. I'll put Caligula in with Trump, because they had a lot in common.
Okay. Listen, there's certainly reason to suggest that that's a possibility. But there's also reason to suggest that the possibility that our republic and our democracy will continue, and we've done it in the past. We've lived through times that were way worse with leaders who were just as bad, if not worse. I mean, look at the Bush administration when we went to war in Iraq on misinformation and hundreds of thousands of people.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Wait a second, I'm not finished yet.
Okay.
How about before that when we went to war in Vietnam on misinformation? How about the 50s and 60s when people were rioting in the streets in opposition to the Vietnam War? How about when our presidents were assassinated? How about when a president candidate was assassinated? How about the leader of the civil rights movement was assassinated? How can you even compare those things to what's going on now? And he hasn't even taken the throne yet. You want to say the throne, but I want to say the seat of the president. Let's wait and see what happens. There's plenty of room for discord and plenty of room for dissent and plenty of room for opposition here in this country, and it's set up that way.
I'm glad you mentioned George Bush, because here's another guy that didn't take intelligence briefings seriously, and he's glossed over the intelligence briefing in August about the terrorist attack, that they might use planes to attack a vital interest, and that's exactly what happened on September 11th. And now we have the president, I want to say president, Mr. Trump, who refuses to go to intelligence briefings. So we could very well have another terrorist attack, and if in fact we did have a terrorist attack, I believe they would suspend many civil rights. During the Civil War, President Lincoln suspended habeas corpus. During World War II, President Roosevelt had internment camps for Japanese. So if we had another or similar type of terrorist attack like 9/11, I believe that Trump would try to suspend many of the civil rights. And he's happy with Syria. He said the other day about the attack in Germany and Turkey. He said, I predicted this. I knew this was going to happen. So if there's another terrorist attack, I would bet that many of the civil rights that they tried to suspend under the Patriot Act, which they did, it will become more inclusive.
Certainly, I will certainly jump in to say that I agree that if there is a terrorist attack in this country, civil liberties are going to be in question. He'll get this whole Muslim ban that he's been talking about. I think will be possible if there's a terrorist attack. I'm not.
Listen, it's definitely possible. I don't know to what extent what civil. I mean, it's happened before here in this country. It's nothing new.
People are prepared to give up their civil liberties
with the phone conversations that, all of those things, and but interring the Japanese during the Second World War. I mean, these were things, and then after they happened, and after the war was over, and years later, and after it became public what they were doing with the phones things, well, the people were in an uproar, and all of those things were discarded.
But we,
and we had to apologize for all of the things that they did, but they did it, and he may try to do it too, and we'll overcome that if we have to.
But we already see some evidences of that, in the sense that Senator Cruz, who's going to be the head of energy, which boggles my mind anyway.
Who's going to be the head of energy?
Senator Cruz, isn't he?
No.
Oh, no,
that's Perry. That's Perry. Rick Perry's going to be the head of.
That's okay.
He's like Rick Perry.
You're a historian.
No,
You're not
that's
okay.
But right, it's Rick Perry. But anyway, Senator Cruz introduced a bill in the Senate. It's called the First Amendment Defense Act, which would allow private individuals in the state and businesses to discriminate against anybody who they considered to be gay or lesbian or trans, and there would be they could not sue, and there would be no federal restrictions. So a business that said, we don't want to have any gay employees working in our lunchroom could do that legally if they said we don't like gay marriage or we don't like gay sex, and there would be nothing the federal government.
No federal remedy.
Right, no federal remedy, and nothing the department, the Justice Department could do about it. So that's already limiting civil liberties. And
but they haven't done that yet, and
well,
it hasn't
Mr.
passed.
Trump said
it hasn't, and if it does pass, it has to be tested in the
no,
courts.
but he said he would
and
sign
if it's
it.
not tested in the courts, then there could be economic repercussions, just like there were in North Carolina when they refused to allow transsexuals into the bathrooms of their choice. And the economic repercussions were very, very big. I mean, the NBA stopped the All-Star game,
but I hear
this
that.
is one step. Once you take the rights of gay and lesbians and trans away, the next step to take the rights of Muslims away. The next step to take the right of dissenters away. It goes in.
Now you're talking like the NRA. The NRA says, yeah, if you take away one little thing that they'll allow a person to have a gun, then that's the end of guns for everybody.
Here's
that's not the way it works.
But here's my question: whether it passes or not, here's what's difficult for me. You know, the last time we were together, and during rehearsal, remember we actually met. I introduced you to two of my friends, and they were very big in the log cabin Republicans.
Gay community, sure.
And these guys said to us that, well, we're not concerned. The reason we were able to support Trump is because we were present at that convention, and he knows he met with us. We are sure that he is going to handle our rights. We're not worried about him. Now, that was 2 weeks ago, and now here we are, and we're presented with this what is it called? The Freedom of Speech?
First Amendment Defense Act.
First Amendment Defense Act. So it doesn't, whether it ever comes into law or not, the point is Trump has already indicated that if it gets before him, he'll sign it.
Well, Pence was the one in Indiana that wanted to
Yes.
legalize conversion therapy.
Yes.
Okay, and he had all of these things on his program. So there are people that foster those ideals, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be initiated into law and it's going to be the law. I mean, look, this conservative Supreme Court with Scali on the court upheld the right of gays to be legally married. He did away with the Defense of Marriage Act. So who's to say if the court's liberal or conservative or whatever? It's a right that's been.
But all we can go by now are the markers, and this is one step. Once you start taking away liberties from one group, it becomes easier and easier and easier to take it away from other groups.
That may be.
But I think the difference is you're saying that if this happens, my question is, the fact that it's even on the table with Donald Trump, who seemed to have made this commitment to the LGBT community.
Well, it's not on his table. Senator Cruz is the one who's
but
going
he
to
said he would sign it. He already committed to sign it.
I didn't even hear that.
No, he did.
Let's wait and see what happens. Let's wait and see if it even gets passed.
Now maybe he'll use influence not to get it passed, to get it stymied in the House or the Senate. But he already committed to saying, if it passes, I will sign it. That's what politicians do. They appeal to that group, and then they screw that group. The SA, Hitler's private army originally, before the SS, was over half homosexual. There was a lot of homosexual.
I never heard that one.
And Hitler supported them until he got power, then he had them all shot. So you can turn it right around. And Ernst Röhm, who was the head of the SA, was a gay guy. And Hitler...
The SS, we're talking about the SS in
SA, right. And that was Hitler's buddy up until he
until
didn't want any more gays because... And just like some of these dictatorships in the world now where, the gays are killed and, summarily killed. So I don't think we're going to be shooting gays in the street, but I believe that the First Amendment Defense Act will pass. I believe Trump will sign it. And, I know what you're going to say, and I'm 50-50 whether the Supreme Court would uphold it as constitutional. But it's not uncommon in dictatorships to go after groups like the gays, and then you go after minorities, and that's how you make everybody else.
Let me just say one thing.
Yeah.
Let me say one thing. The Senate, as it's presently composed, it's 52 Republicans and 48 Democrats. I can't imagine... And certainly the Republicans that are the Senator Republicans, except for Cruz and a couple of other real right-wing senators, I mean, for the most part, it's been a body that has a lot more sense than what the House of Representatives has, that's for sure. And I can't imagine that, first of all, Ted Cruz is not loved by his compatriots in the Senate. That's a known fact. And I doubt that would ever pass the Senate. Now, well,
I
this
say is
national
that-
security advisor I know has been labeled a
it's
kookaboo,
questionable.
yeah, but I mean, some of these people, that the Secretary of State, I mean, he's a
Tillerson.
businessman. I mean, there were a lot of billionaires. Wilbur Ross is there,
But wait a
Secretary
minute.
of Commerce.
But Rex Tillerson, let's just, on that one, Secretary of State. I am saying that you got somebody like Rex Tillerson, ExxonMobil,
Okay.
largest corporation in the world, with his own security force. I understand that that's not
Right.
important, but with his own security force, who is now going to be the spokesperson for the policies of the United States of America, for the policies of the president. My question about his interest is where does he cease to be an oil person and become the person who's concerned about what happens to this country? Because I think putting the oil man in charge of the Middle East is the fox guarding the hen house.
Well, it's something to be concerned about. There's no question
Yes.
about it. But we don't know. I mean, a lot of people who are not in business, who know him, speak very highly of him. I mean, I didn't know him that well. I mean, I don't know whether he's going to be great or not, but a lot of people who are not involved in the oil business and not involved in business in general speak very highly of him. He may be a terrific guy. We don't know what he's going to do.
What would have happened if a Democrat were elected president, appointed someone to be Secretary of State who received an award by Putin and to say that they were a friend and that they were the greatest person, the greatest friend of Russia?
The Republicans would be screaming.
Well,
Well, that's exactly what's happening here. The Democrats are screaming.
Nobody's screaming.
But
real
would
loud.
that mean that he's a bad guy?
No,
that he
no, to your
that he
point-
wouldn't do a good job on behalf of the country?
No, to your point, I can
I
agree.
don't
That
know-
doesn't
I
mean
don't know that.
That
No.
doesn't mean that he's a bad guy. But
I don't
here's
think
my
he's a
question.
bit good.
Listen, he has to be. He's going to go through a process, before
Yeah, he
before
has to
Congress.
be confirmed, unlike Flynn.
He has to
and-
be
and
affirmed.
Madnick.
It's not like he put Flynn in and nobody, whether
he
you
has
like
to
him or
be
not,
the-
he's going to be there.
What we have to do is we have to make certain, and I don't want to do it in this segment. I want to do it in our next segment because we have to be certain that we get back to all of these people that voted for this man and voted against their own self-interest. I think that that's an important piece for us to get to. But I also want to say that I have no faith and no confidence in the Senate. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm here. This is being recorded. I have no confidence that calmer minds will, in fact, rule the day for the confirmation hearings for these proposed cabinet appointments.
You know, unless they have 60 votes, it's not filibuster proof. So there's certain safeguards that are built into the system that can help. I mean, there have been people that have been appointed and have not been confirmed for various
But wait a
reasons
minute.
that showed prejudice in certain areas.
No. The reason that I have no confidence is not for that. I have no confidence for someone who did get through the process. And I spend a lot of time talking about Uncle Thomas. But I watched those Clarence Thomas hearings and I kept saying there's no way, especially after Robert Byrd spoke. Senator Byrd spoke and he was eloquent and he was elegant, but he was also eloquent and he was he spoke and he was Southern and he spoke truth. And I thought, well, certainly these people are going to listen to him, and they didn't. So that's why I'm saying I don't have confidence in the.
Well, wait a second. I mean, a guy like Arlen Specter, was in his camp.
Arlen Specter was, yes.
That was amazing to me. That was amazing to me.
To watch him be
Here's the
prosecutor, to be prosecutorial against Anita Hill, it was terrible.
This is the first time we had a president-elect where we feel, and a lot of people feel, threatened by the possibility of a suspension of civil rights, a move towards dictatorial power. And to take that lightly would be foolish. That's what they did in Germany. That's what they did in Italy. And so if you're right, I'll be the happiest person in the world.
I'm not suggesting we take it lightly, by the way.
Therefore, what I'm saying to people is these are all the things that could happen, have happened historically, and they got to be aware and they got to be ready to take action immediately, because once they're in place and once civil rights are abandoned, it's especially in this day and age, it's very, very difficult to get them back. So You have to look at the trends, and people can't let it, because it doesn't happen in one snap of a finger overnight. It's this group, civil rights, and people say, well, you know, that's okay, and we got to prevent another 9/11, so we're going to let, pass the Patriot Act and let the government listen to everything you say, and then, well, maybe we need to put some Muslims in holding areas, just like they wanted to do with the Japanese, and before you know it, we have a dictatorship. So I think what we have to do is be aware of all these things, and the public has to be aware of all these things, so that in case they start to happen, we can mount opposition and protest.
Mark,
what's happened most recently, and especially with the eavesdropping on the telephone conversations, when it became known that it was going on, then there was tremendous throwback from that. So I would suspect that if there, and by the way, I mean, you always have to be, aware that these things can happen. But if it starts to happen, I'm 100% behind you, and you really should stand up to it, because I think that is you have to stop it in the beginning. But it hasn't happened yet, and we're talking, we're supposing what's going to happen, and you're suggesting it might happen, and I'm just suggesting that it may not happen either.
Yeah, but
so let's wait and see, and there'll be enough blowback if something like that happens. I'm sure.
Flu, but this year I got a flu shot. I want to prevent it from happening.
Okay,
it's the same thing.
But here's what I want to say. I think what our challenge here, and what we are committed to, is talking to people in a way and expressing ideas in a way, not so much for anything other than to say, you need to be looking at this. You need to be engaged. When we did those election shows, what were we saying? You need to we didn't tell people how to vote. We just said you need to get out there and you need to vote. So I think what I hear happening, and I'm happy that you have that certain amount of optimism in terms of what, I mean, and I guess it's necessary, because I hid under the covers for a couple of days after the election. I think a lot of us did. And now we're waking up and saying, okay, so what do we do now? What's our job now? And I guess our job is to be paying attention.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no question we have to pay attention. But I'm suggesting that, to try and stop something before it even happens, or before it even start to do it, is something that we don't. That's just as bad. It's just as bad as not doing anything.
Yeah, but this is a bill that's introduced. It's going to be introduced in the Senate, so at least we.
Well,
can
let's see what happens
right
when it's introduced in the Senate.
We can write to
you're saying that
Senator Casey and Senator Toomey and tell them that they have to vote against it.
So we should be asking. This is
right,
it.
Exactly.
We should be using our platform to ask
no question
those
about
folk who are watching us tonight to consider whether or not you agree with a policy like this. And the fact that it's even something that's going to be introduced means that we've got to be proactive. That's the one good thing about this election. It has made us all realize we have to be invested in what happens. We just can't sit by and watch this happen.
Well,
and
unfortunately, too many people are not involved. Half the people in this country didn't even vote.
Yes.
So
half the people.
You have to be out there all the time.
Engaged.
And that's why this is important. Unfortunately, we're not reaching 100 million people. But as many
that's
people...
That's going to change soon.
That's good.
That's going to change soon.
I'm going to ask for more money. But the point is the people that we do reach, they do have to be engaged. And I agree with that. All I'm saying is we don't want to try to stop something before it even happens, because we don't know if it's going to happen or not. But when we see that it is going to happen, then we have to stand up to it and do what we have to do.
You have to stand up for the rights of everyone, because
it's called pre-censorship, and I don't think that's a democratic trait either.
Well, no, we know this is a bill that's going to be introduced, and we have to defend LGBT rights as well as anybody, because once they erode one group's rights, it's easier to take the rights away from everyone else. I mean, everybody thinks that in Nazi Germany he just went after the Jews. He went after homosexuals. He went after gypsies.
Sure.
He went after communists. So there was a lot of groups that were persecuted and put in concentration camps, and you can't just say, well, this one is, it's a side issue. It's not that important an issue. They're all important.
Can we ask you we're going to ask you to put a pin in it, because we are going to come back and revisit some of the topics that came up that we couldn't get to. And I'm just going to ask the audience to please make certain that you tune in next week. This has been Conversations Across Time. This is And we pride ourselves here as not telling you what to think. We just want to make sure you are thinking. Good night.
Conversations across time. 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 Conversations across time.